To mark his 51st birthday, and a day after Epstein's scandal broke, the Queen gave her own response to the controversy. She made Andrew Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George. Now, you guys, I know we don't like to speak ill of the Queen, but I do have to tell you that I think that Andrew was her blind spot. Why would she give him these high honors? Why would she decorate him in this way? Except to say, I believe everything he says and I have no questions about anything he's ever done. We're all biased towards our children, but I would hope that if my children were publicly shaming the name of the family, I would not also shame the name of the family by condoning that and giving them all kinds of prizes and awards in public. You can still love your kids and not accept what they're doing. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. Silence was the name of the game here, if she just couldn't bear to see him embarrassed. But don't call more attention to him by giving him an award he does not deserve. That seems to me to be calling more shame on his head, because then everyone's going to drag up everything else he's ever done and say, why did she give him this? Remember when he did X, Y, and Z? Now we're asking for more scrutiny as to why he deserved the award. Just don't say anything. Hello, how are you? Welcome to my channel. My name is Cheer Denise. We're going to keep going in Entitled. And the last time we read, very briefly, you'll remember that Andrew had gone to see Epstein. You know, none of us in our wildest imagination can figure out why in the world he needed to go stay for multiple days to tell Jeffrey Epstein, hey, you know what? Since you're a pedophile, I'm kind of out. But apparently he needed to go to that guy's house, sleep at that guy's house, stay for multiple days at that guy's house, go for walks with that guy, and all because his honor required him to make an extended visit before he told the guy, you know what, you're a sicko, I want nothing to do with you. Well, Andrew publicly claimed that the reason for the visit was so he could end the relationship. Records between Jeffrey and his bank suggest that Andrew was asking for $200 million for some oil and gas company that he claimed to be a part of. So I don't understand how you end things with somebody but then make deals to see them later, what with your oil and gas company that you are asking Jeffrey to fund. That doesn't sound like you're breaking up to me. He also apparently was asking that Jeffrey help Sarah with her many, many bills. What? Why? And as we asked last time, it begs the question, what was Jeffrey Epstein getting out of ever giving Sarah money? Now, she claims that she was able to get 15,000 pounds or $15,000 from him. I can't remember which. Either way, why was he giving her any money at all? But of course, other records show, and there's a much more complete picture of the fact that he actually gave her more like $2 million. But my question is to you, why was he giving her anything? What I think is really sick about this whole thing is that Andrew and Sarah are both trading on the royal family in order for people to be interested in them and to work with them and to give them money, deals, and freebies, you know? But Sarah gets in trouble because she does it, and it's caught, and it's clunky. And I think what she was punished because she did it in a messy, clunky, embarrassing, cringy way, but they're all doing it. Ain't no way anyone's investing time with Prince Andrew because he's a suave businessman with all kinds of know-how, and he's somebody who's really going to be able to grease the wheels for you. Ain't no way, okay? He is a bumbling fool who is only too easily distracted by a Russian model in skimpy clothes. But somehow we're all supposed to believe through Andrew that he had very above-board relationships with this financier, Jeffrey Epstein, and there wasn't anything sketchy about it. Yet Jeffrey Epstein's willing to pay off Sarah's debts and give her any money at all, but why? Why would anyone give Sarah a dime? She can't keep a dime. If you give her money, she will spend that money. She won't pay her bills. So why was he funding it? So a lot of questions were left lingering in our minds yesterday, okay? And all I can do is get more and more annoyed. Now, in this section, we are still under the larger heading of Trapped, and we are in a chapter entitled Greeks Bearing Gifts. For Andrew, further damaging revelations were to come. In February 2011, the assistant editor at the Mail on Sunday contacted the Duke's press secretary, Ed Perkins, claiming the paper had a photo of the prince with Virginia Roberts, who claimed she'd slept with Andrew. Perkins assembled a crisis team of senior palace officials and lawyers. The Queen summoned her second son to a meeting. The Duke assured his mother that he had no sexual relationships with Virginia Roberts or any of Jeffrey Epstein's girls, a source said. The Duke talked to the lawyers on the phone, and with the approval of the Duke and his office, the lawyers drew up a legal document that was meant as a shot across the bow of the press in Britain. Buckingham Palace lawyers issued a defamation warning. To mark his 51st birthday, and a day after Epstein's scandal broke, the Queen gave her own response to the controversy. She made Andrew Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George. Now, you guys, I know we don't like to speak ill of the Queen, but I do have to tell you that I think that Andrew was her blind spot. Pure and simple. I don't even think it's debatable. The way she covered for him, covered for his wife, why would she be giving him decorations when he was just caught with a pedophile? And for her to back him the way she did, basically to say, I believe him so much that I am going to give him Knight Grand Cross of the Order of St. Michael and St. George. Why would she give him these high honors? Why would she decorate him in this way? Except to say, I believe everything he says and I have no questions about anything he's ever done. That was ill thought through, and I think it shows stubbornness on her part in the area of her son. And we're all biased towards our children, but I would hope that if my children were publicly shaming the name of the family, I would not also shame the name of the family by condoning that and giving them all kinds of prizes and awards in public. You can still love your kids and not accept what they're doing. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. And if your son is out there wasting taxpayer money, running around the country with pedophiles, and having shady business contacts in Asia that you can't seem to explain, there's no reason to give him public awards. Love him all you want. Refuse to criticize him publicly all you want. No one was ever asking the Queen for a public statement on, why she despised her son. But silence was the name of the game here, if she just couldn't bear to see him embarrassed. But don't call more attention to him by giving him an award he does not deserve. That seems to me to be calling more shame on his head, because then everyone's going to drag up everything else he's ever done and say, why did she give him this? Remember when he did X, Y, and Z? Now we're asking for more scrutiny as to why he deserved the award. Just don't say anything. On February 28th, there were calls from MPs, including Chris Bryant, to remove Andrew from his role as special representative because of his alleged links to the Libyan regime. At the same time, Stephen Day, a former British ambassador to Tunisia, wrote to the Foreign Secretary William Hague asking for Andrew to be sacked because his hobnobbing with dodgy Arab businessmen was doing serious damage to the royal family and to Britain's political, diplomatic, and commercial interests. The letter leaked to the Daily Telegraph, highlighting Andrew's lunch at Buckingham Palace with Sakir El-Materi, convicted of corruption in Abyssinia by a Tunisian court in 2011, son-in-law of the Tunisian dictator Zayn al-Abidine Ben Ali, and various private visits. Day copied the letter to 3 government departments. Quote, the message being spread around the world is that Britain is so desperate for business, so incapable of competing openly that it needs a backdoor approach and is content to work closely with dodgy fixers and politicians. The wife of a head of state explained confidentially that Andrew's reputation on the international circuit was such that her husband was afraid of being photographed with him. No one wants that association now, she said. This is what everyone's talking about. There was further pressure after it became known that the Libyan businessman Tarek Khatuni, a guest at Princess Beatrice's 21st birthday party, at which he had given her an £18,000 diamond necklace, had boasted that he could influence the senior royal to support certain commercial projects. According to Khatuni's girlfriend, Muna Himroundi, Andrew had himself tried to broker a consultancy job for Khatuni with a British water treatment company, Bywater. Andrew's friendship with Azerbaijan President Ilham Aliyev, whose regime was accused of torturing protesters, rigged elections, and throwing political opponents in jail, came under renewed scrutiny, especially after local media suggested the Duke had his own business interests in the country, including a golf complex on the shores of the Caspian Sea. A former diplomat says that the sale of Sunninghill was on the agenda during meetings with members of one of the ruling royal families in the Gulf. Andrew had then tried to set up a meeting between Timur Kulibayev, the purchaser of Sunninghill, and Rory Tapner, the chief executive of Courts and the head of Royal Bank of Scotland's Wealth Management Division. Andrew had emailed a fixer for Kulibayev, named Kanis Rakishev, The email said, if possible, I would like to have the CEO of RBS Wealth, Tori Tapner, and John Hurricane, CEO Global Markets, come to Kazakhstan to see Kulibayev with a view to discuss wealth management and global banking markets. Otherwise, it could be arranged in London at Kulibayev's convenience when or if he comes here next. When approached, Buckingham Palace replied that Prince Andrew, who, quote, works to encourage economic growth in the United Kingdom, was only trying to help counts make contacts with overseas markets. A source at the bank refuted this. This was not, to put it mildly, a meeting that we would have been keen to take. Kazakh oligarchs are the sort of people we generally don't touch with a barge pole. The Sunday Times reported, quote, the wife of an international politician was recently disgusted at offerings to him from the Abu Dhabi royal family. Jewels, diamond watches and things. Even Princess Beatrice, who was there with him, got jewelry worth thousands of pounds. The palace said it had no knowledge of these gifts. They are so conveniently ignorant, aren't they? At the beginning of March 2011, Sir Ivor Roberts, a former ambassador to Italy, Yugoslavia, and Ireland, revealed that he had been forced to send in officials to clear up after Prince Andrew managed to offend key people brought to see him. He has that rather unfortunate manner of being brusque to the point of rudeness, said Roberts. If the net result is negative, you wonder whether he should be in that position. Officials were beginning to agree that Sir John Cunliffe, the Prime Minister's advisor on overseas business in Europe, now met with the Prince to assess his future as part of the 6-month tasking review. In April, in a fight back, 20 prominent businessmen signed a letter in the Daily Telegraph praising Andrew's work as trade envoy. Organized by a well-respected city figure, Ronald Lehman, they included Stuart Gulliver, Chief Executive HSBC, Lord Levine, a chairman of Lloyd's of London, and Johan Elias. But according to the paper, several endorsements from executives circulated by UKTI were up to 4 years old. And some of the companies involved said they were unhappy that their names had been used. It was not enough to save Andrew. He's in for more hot water because we've all got huge questions about what he's doing. His involvement in trade just does not seem legitimate anymore. Meanwhile, he's about to be plagued by the picture of Virginia Giuffre because, of course, that picture has come out, but Virginia hasn't spoken about it yet. But now she is. The book goes on to say that the picture of Andrew with Jeffrey Epstein in Central Park had been noticed in Australia. On March 1st, the Mail on Sunday published an article outlining Virginia Roberts' claim about journalist Sharon Churcher, long on the trail, who had flown to Australia to interview her over the course of a week. It also carried a picture of Andrew with his arms around the teenager taken at Ghislaine Maxwell's London home on the night they first met in March 2001. Michael Thomas, a photographer who had accompanied Churcher, remembered how Giuffre had produced a collection of pictures taken on her travels with Epstein, but that one stood out. It was a normal print, as you would have gotten back from the photo developers back in the days of negatives. I photographed the photograph on the table, and then I sent my copy to the picture desk. Virginia kept the original. Now 27, Giuffre claimed Epstein had groomed her as a prostitute and farmed her out to his influential friends, including Prince Andrew, with whom she had slept 3 times. On the first occasion in London, in March 2001, Ghislaine had taken her shopping for a bag, a couple of dresses, a pair of embroidered jeans, and a pink singlet, perfume, and makeup, before returning to Maxwell's house in Kinnerton Street in Belgravia, where Andrew arrived for tea at 4 that afternoon. Then Ghislaine asked Andrew how old he thought I was, and he guessed 17, and they all laughed. Ghislaine made a joke that I was getting too old for Jeffrey. After dinner and dancing in Tramp nightclub, they returned to Maxwell's Mews house, where she and the prince took a bath together. You guys, she's so young. Imagine how gross it would be to take a bath with a man who's 50. I mean, you know, Virginia, I think over the years has become a questionable witness, but I never doubted what she said about her time with Epstein. And I think it would just be such a scary world if you found yourself believing and feeling that the only way to make your way in the world was to degrade yourself like this. And there's plenty of girls who feel that way and are willing to degrade themselves for people who are nobodies, you know? But imagine if you, at the tender age that she was, a prince from the British royal family wants you and you're already comfortable exchanging sex. So there you are, but you're going to tell me that she went to bed that night and thought, I feel great about what happened. Without some nagging questions about, I don't know that I loved it. I mean, we know she didn't. She said he sweated all over her and was really awkward. And it just makes me sad. It makes me sad how easy it is for us as women to trade on our looks, to trade on our sex appeal. The world makes it way too easy to cheapen ourselves because young women are a hot commodity. There's no greater power than beauty when you're young. And unfortunately, you're too young to know how to deal with that power. But it is true power for a little while. But you don't know what you're doing with it, and you also don't know what the cost of that power is. And it just makes me sad to think about her in that position, getting into a bathtub with this old man. It's so gross, and it's so gross he would want that from her, because she's like the age of his daughters. She says that in the bathtub, he started licking my toes, between my toes, the arches of my feet. And then we went into the bedroom, and he proceeded to make love to me, so to speak. In the morning, Ghislaine said, "You did well, he had fun." We flew straight back to the States. Flight logs confirmed the Tycoon's jet, with Virginia Guay as a passenger, and had flown to Paris on March 6, 2001, continuing to Grenada, Tangier, and London, before returning to New York. For her services, Virginia had been paid $15,000. She then met Andrew a second time at Easter 2001 in the library of Epstein's New York home. She recounted how Ghislaine had just given him a present, a big toy that was his spitting image puppet. He was smiling ear to ear. He looked like a kid whose parents were taking him to Disney World. The official record of royal engagements from the time shows the Duke flew to New York on April 9th, catching a morning flight from Heathrow, which would have landed about lunchtime. It lists no engagements for the rest of the day. Flight records suggest Miss Roberts arrived in New York the same day. The Duke then had a full day of events in the city on April 10th, before flying to Boston in the morning and returning to New York on the afternoon of April 11th. Andrew's aides flew back to London, leaving him in North America. His next official engagement came 8 days later in South Korea on April 19th. The third and last occasion Virginia Guay claimed she was abused was on Epstein's island, Little St. James, later that month. After Epstein suggested she carry a baby for him, Virginia fled to Australia, where she married, had 3 children, and tried to put her experiences with him behind her. In 2008, the FBI contacted her after finding pictures of her at Epstein's Palm Beach home. She settled her case with the financier, but had now come forward after the Central Park pictures appeared. Andrew refused to comment on the story. You guys, Epstein wanted to have a baby with her? I mean, I'm not surprised. You hear about this all the time, where these people impregnate girls for various reasons. Sometimes they want the children. They want an heir, but more often than not, they just want the baby. And there's various reasons why they might want that baby. When you look at Epstein's Island and you see the temple that he had, there's all sorts of reasons why one might want a baby. If you're going to meander in occult circles, there's all kinds of reasons that you might want that baby, but none of the reasons are good. The book goes on to say that papers were calling for Andrew to relinquish his role as special representative. Under the title, Our Less Than Grand Old Duke of York, Jenny McCartney argued in the Daily Telegraph that Prince Andrew should be stripped of his role as UK Special Envoy for Trade before he stains the royal family's reputation further. Max Hastings in the Daily Mail, under the title, How Very Different It Might Have Been Had Someone Spanked Andrew's Bottom When He Was Young, wrote, He aspires to a first-class standard of living on an economy income. He never takes a car if a helicopter is quicker, even to the golf course. He chooses the company of crooks and tyrants who will entertain him in palaces rather than of honest men who might expect him to carry his own bags upstairs. Hastings felt that there needed to be less deference and highlighted the royals' sense of their own status, which kept them at a distance from the rest of the population. Their belief that the rules and conventions that constrain the rest of us simply do not apply to them is bred to the bone. Hastings, like other commentators, called for Andrew to go. The Duke had exploited his royal privileges and blundered around abroad for long enough because nobody has stopped him. The former director of the Confederation of British Industry, Digby Jones, who had been brought in as a mentor for the Duke, also accepted that it was the right time for Andrew to go. He hasn't helped himself by putting himself in positions which, frankly, he shouldn't. In my view, 10 years is enough. Meanwhile, Andrew's ex-wife continued to support him. "The Duke is a man who does not know how to tell an untruth or behave dishonorably. There have been errors of judgment, but nothing real has been done wrong by him, ever." It was the intervention of Christopher Geet, the Queen's private secretary, which would finally bring Andrew's trade envoy years to an end in July 2011, something for which the Duke would subsequently enact his own revenge. You guys, Sarah over there piping up, "He's never done anything wrong in his life. A couple of times he made some mistakes, but he never did anything really wrong." It's like, pipe down already. We're in enough hot water without you. I can't tell you how much I would disdain to hear her coming up behind me to defend me. That's the last person I would want in my defense. Okay, this next section is called Special Representative. Andrew's reputation as special representative is mixed. One of the problems was that his role and the governance of it were never particularly clear. He was supposedly to support UK trade and investment objectives, which were set by ministers with the support of the board, but he did not always follow his tasked activities, nor were people sure who should control and discipline him. Seems like the story of his life. Who's going to control and discipline this person? No one has known since his birth. The various heads of UKTI, Sir David Wright, Sir Stephen Brown, and Sir Andrew Kahn, ostensibly were his line managers, but ambassadors were reluctant to complain to them. Lord Jay, a former head of the Foreign Office, said that when complaints were made to him, they were passed to Buckingham Palace officials. Another senior diplomat confirmed that he forwarded complaints to Geet. He was aware of Andrew's reputation for being time-consuming and status-conscious. The Duke also had a low boredom threshold and harsh manner. There were concerns about who he was seeing, said the diplomat, and that he had a freelance business career with a paralleled agenda, fixing meetings with people who were not part of his mission. After initial complaints from embassies in the Middle East and Chile, the Queen's then private secretary, Robin Janvrin, had raised the matter with the Queen, and Andrew was given a warning, but it was clearly not heeded. Chris Bryant, as Minister for Europe, covering Russia and the Caucasus, as well as all the consular activities, had extensive dealings with the Duke. His trips as the special representative for UK trade and investment were legendary, but not for the right reasons, said Bryant. The charge sheet against Andrew is very long, and it is undermining the valuable, diligent work of the rest of the royal family. Bryant said he tried to raise concerns about Andrew with number 10, but when he started asking questions about the prince's suitability for the post, in particular his relationships in Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, there was a real chill in the air, the kind of chill that only a diplomat frightened of a row can engender. Bryant thought Foreign Office staff were embarrassed by the Duke. A couple of senior staff even told him so. But Downing Street resisted anything that might possibly be interpreted as an attack on a member of the royal family, so the matter was quietly dropped. Andrew's visits were a complicated matter. Trips were discussed by the Royal Visits Committee, a Cabinet Office committee chaired by the Foreign Office's permanent undersecretary and comprising officials from the royal household, the Cabinet Office number 10 in the Department of Trade and Industry. Sometimes embassies bid for him. Sometimes UKTI determined where Andrew should go, but increasingly it appeared the Duke, with his own agenda in mind, decided which countries he should visit. According to one official at the New York consulate, Andrew often just arrived in the city without having been asked by them. We would have to find things for him to do, but really he came as an excuse to network. He was certainly there more than we wanted him to be. The Duke would often commandeer the consulate car, having shaken off his PPOs to visit his, quote, friends. It was rumored he shared one mistress with Bill Clinton. He always wanted Epstein at events and preferred receptions to dinners so he could slip away early. If it had to be a dinner, then he wanted an early one. Andrew reveled in high society, and for him it was all about the money. He did the minimum required to fulfill his role. The official also said Andrew's ex-wife would regularly turn up, though uninvited, and a place would have to be found for her at an event. It was clear they operated together, and she was all about making connections through her ex-husband's role. She was using events for him as networking opportunities. At a lunch at the U.S. headquarters of HSBC arranged for the prince to meet senior business executives, Andrew took exception to being introduced as representing UKTI. He loudly interrupted, banged his knife on the table, and yelled at his private secretary, "Why can you never get people to get this right? They all work for me. I don't work for them." He then proceeded to lecture a senior executive of CBRE, the world's largest real estate firm, about U.S. property issues and complain of how he was treated by the British government. As he left the room, the CEO of a major international search firm commented, "That was why we threw the tea in the harbor." UK trade and investment had originally felt Andrew had been foisted on them, but they eventually began to work better together after Alistair Watson, the Duke's private secretary, had suggested a 3-year strategy, and they began to make better use of him. Watson set up opportunities for business or embassies to follow up, especially in India, the Far East and China, and in emerging markets, but inevitably much of the Duke's time was spent in the Middle East. As a spokesman said, Middle East potentates like meeting princes. He comes in as the son of the queen, and that opens doors that otherwise would remain closed. He can raise problems with a crown prince, and 4 or 5 weeks later we discover that the difficulties have been overcome and the contract can be signed. They didn't send him to developed countries like France and Sweden, because there a member of the royal family would make little difference. But in developing countries, or the Far East, a prince can get in because of who he is. Robin Lamb, who was an ambassador in Bahrain, found Andrew's visits valuable because of the opportunity for the Duke to deliver important messages about the bilateral business relationship at the highest level and the rare access it gave Lamb to the King of Bahrain. He recognized the close relationship between the senior Bahrainian royals and the royal family, but the confidence in his status, which allowed him to speak as an equal to the king and the prince, could sometimes be a challenge. There were occasions when his sense of entitlement could lead him to say or do something insensitive or unhelpful. However, Peter Ford, another ambassador to Bahrain, never saw evidence that the visits led to any contacts. Indeed, visits took us away from our normal business. A former ambassador in the Middle East agreed, feeling that drumming up business was a matter of the ambassador or minister, not for a member of the royal family. "I found him weird," said the ambassador. "He invaded one's personal space. He'd rant and was unable to read a room. He behaved like a teenager, boasting that he could connect easily to Bill Gates." Alistair Morgan had first met Prince Andrew when he was acting chief executive of the Invest in Britain Bureau, which subsequently became Invest UK, within UK Trade and Investment between 1999 and 2001. He'd been director of investment at the British Embassy in Tokyo and encountered Andrew, accompanied by David Stern, a German investor, in October 2011 while at the British Embassy in Beijing. He found there was a cachet in Andrew's visits. He was available in a way that was useful with the benefit of a follow-up reception at Buckingham Palace, said Morgan, who also felt the Duke wanted to learn, asked intelligent questions about inward investment, and to start with, made a good impression. Since the Duke operated above government, he could do things that ministers could not, and he provided continuity that an elected politician did not. Nonetheless, Andrew could be petulant and wanted to be his own boss. I remember once at the embassy in Tokyo, he threw a collection of business cards he had been given into the air, saying, "What am I meant to do with these?" An ambassador who worked extensively in HR management and recruitment thought Andrew remarkably unsuited for the role he was put in and without the skills for the job. Sir David Warren, a former ambassador to Japan, who had also been the UKTI director in charge of industrial sectors and then overseas markets, felt that Andrew could be an asset, but that he did not always behave in a conventional way. Warren remembered the Duke arranging to meet John Brown, head of BP, without Foreign Office officials being present, to discuss oil and gas in Angola when, because of the sensitivity and wider context, such a discussion might have been better structured through the Foreign Office. On another occasion, Andrew's chiding of the local business community was interpreted as bullying, and the embassy had to soothe ruffled feathers. Lord Levine, a former chairman of Lloyd's, who met him a dozen times, also had a mixed view of Andrew. He found the Duke willing to help with a good knowledge of the insurance business and prepared to work hard to promote companies. However, Andrew would be nice to anyone important and turn on the charm when he wanted, but ignore anyone who was of no use to him. He was good company, but very rude to people who didn't deserve his attention, said Levine. Martin Hatfield, a former ambassador to Indonesia and minister in Japan, felt that in those countries, Andrew had a limited impact. The Japanese didn't fully understand his role. They couldn't get their head around the idea of a member of the royal family involved in a commercial role. The Duke also resisted anyone guiding him around the guests at a reception. He felt he should meet who he wanted. His personal style was abrupt and direct, which was difficult for the Japanese to deal with. Though the embassy was trying to develop financial services in Indonesia, Hatfield remembered, "We hadn't bid for the visit, and we sensed that he wanted to come rather than his visit had been requested." Chris Hune, who was Energy Secretary between May 2010 and February 2011, found himself invited by Andrew to a tea at Buckingham Palace. He was looking for work. And knowing of his reputation, I did not want to give him ministerial cover for his activities, said Hune. However, Christopher Garnett, who ran Euromoney's conference business for many years, had a much more positive experience with Andrew, who was involved with conferences in Cairo and London, finding him well-informed and interested. The Duke made introductions in Abu Dhabi, though the Crown Prince, which raised £300,000 in sponsorship, and Garnett remembered a conference in March 2006 where Andrew stayed all day and gave a speech from notes he had prepared in the course of the day, which was fluent and coherent. It was clear he had taken everything in. While some diplomats said he was good in receptions, talking to everyone, and on top of his brief, many others had an entirely different experience, saying that Andrew only did what he wanted to do, often bypassing carefully arranged VIP reception lines to talk to attractive women, ignoring the program, or leaving early. One ambassador in Southeast Asia had initially welcomed the prince's visit, feeling that there was major opportunities for trade and investment, and that a senior royal could make a difference at the top level. He was impressed by Andrew's charisma and energy, but felt the Duke didn't relate well to less senior contacts or staff. He didn't seem to understand the responsibilities or accountability that came with his status, or think through the consequences of what he said for those with less privilege, said the ambassador. Although, as a senior royal, Andrew was a high-rank asset, he was also a liability who had to be managed, self-centered, and showed little interest in the problems of others. Many speak of how Andrew's staff often requested that attractive women be invited to events, with a private secretary specifying, "He likes blondes," to which one consul replied, "I'm a diplomat, not a pimp." It was rumored Andrew brought women with him, and that he liked to stay in hotels rather than the residence as it gave him more independence in whom he saw, whether women or businessmen. Stories are told of escorts masquerading as professional women being provided that he could pick up. The consul, who met Andrew several times, remembered during one visit, "He made a bloody nuisance of himself. He sat there for 2 hours and said nothing." Part of the deal for coming out was to talk to British businessmen, but at the last minute he said that he couldn't make the meeting, despite the trouble that we had setting it up. Instead, he played golf. Another ambassador felt he was very contrary, changing arrangements long in the planning, and that he always believed he knew best. The diplomats were doing their best to promote British interests, and it was frustrating that he was not always supporting them in that common end. One ambassador's wife was upset after the prince criticized the way she had decorated the residence. Another chased after him when he left without thanking her for his stay. In Brunei, he kept both the ambassador and Sultan's sister, Princess Masna, who had been deputed to look after him, waiting an hour without offering explanation or apology. Many talk of eccentricities, such as bringing his own Weetabix and a crested teapot, as well as being demanding. Why would you bring your own Weetabix? They are everywhere. I mean, I myself do like Weetabix, but I just can't imagine bringing my own box. They can get you a box of Weetabix, just like they've got an ironing board. You don't have to bring this stuff. One embassy instruction was to not ask any questions about the royal family or talk to him about golf. Arriving just before midnight at one guest house, Andrew asked one ambassador to arrange him a massage. On another occasion, he requested a discovery rather than the embassy car, and then complained about the car throughout his stay. On a visit to Johannesburg, he expressed a wish to meet Nelson Mandela, but no commercial flight would allow his protection officer to carry a weapon, so 2 private jets had to be hired at great expense. On another occasion, his private jet had to make 2 journeys from Singapore to Brunei, to the inconvenience of the crew rota, because he had so much baggage. He's got to have those bags full of Weetabix. In Oman, he upset the Sultan by requesting money from him, a diplomatic faux pas which caused some problems in British-Omani relations, and Qaboos bin Zayed Al Sayed refused to have anything further to do with him. One former ambassador in Central Asia found Andrew's behavior odd and him arrogant and cantankerous, shouty and with a tendency to bad-mouth diplomats, saying that they were up themselves. On one car journey, the Duke screamed when he discovered his investments had gone up and talked about them for some time. On another visit, after taking exception to something, Andrew kicked a wall, but clearly did not think his behavior at all strange. A sense of his time as special representative can be seen in a 2013 BBC Two satirical drama, Ambassadors, starring David Mitchell and Robert Webb as 2 hapless British diplomats in the fictitious Republic of Tajikistan, and in particular, the second episode, The Prince's Trousers, centered around a visit by Prince Mark of Baths, played by Tom Hollander. The series, based on 200 pages of research from interviews with diplomats, ran for 3 episodes until, reputedly, the victim of international BBC rivalry. So that's where we have to stop today. I can't tell you how much I dislike Andrew. But I also find myself uninterested in commenting on his behavior. Because Andrew's behavior is so appallingly bad, and for him to be allowed to get away with it so often disgusts me to the point of not being interested in it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, this is such an obvious problem that just wasn't dealt with, that all I can do is be like, I turned my back on that. That is... And maybe that's the problem. Maybe that's how everybody felt. Like, this is just so obviously an issue that if you people in the palace aren't going to deal with it, then why should we entangle ourselves in trying to get you guys to hear? Why am I going to scream myself hoarse to be heard about the problem that is Prince Andrew, when it's obvious that people in charge who could have eliminated the problem just couldn't be bothered? And I think that Sarah evokes more commentary from me because I'm surprised that somebody who was allowed in would act like this. Andrew has a certain armor about him because he was born into it. So the way he acts is sort of no consequence, because what are you guys going to do? Not make me a prince? I am a prince. It comes with the territory. I can pretty much do what I will because you guys can't really say anything about it. You can't take away my birthright of being a prince. But with Sarah's behavior, you would think that she'd be a little bit more cognizant, a little bit more aware, a little bit more desirous of maintaining her reputation because it's not handed to her on a silver platter. You know, she sort of has to earn her right to still be there and be there respectfully. And so it makes more sense to clamor against what she's up to because it's shocking that somebody would just assume she can act however and that she has the same birthright as her blood royal husband. But Andrew, it feels like a lost cause to complain about him because they don't care how he behaves. They never have. But it is frustrating and disappointing to see somebody that I respect so much as the Queen not taking her son's behavior seriously until forced to by other members of the royal family, which, you know, that of course is coming. We know it is. But her handing out prizes right after his pathetic behavior, I mean, look, even when you look back in the Bible at King David, great king, terrible father. Like, the Bible doesn't even try to mince words. The Bible literally says that David never questioned his children. And literally the Bible says he didn't even ask his son, what are you doing? You know, and I think of that so often. It's like a person can be an excellent monarch and a horrible father. And I think we see that actually a lot, where great leaders are oftentimes appallingly bad husbands or fathers. And it seems like if you can be a great leader over here, what are you doing? Like, you know, charity begins at home. Let's raise these kids to be members of society that we want to have around. But if you put your job ahead of your first job, which is to raise the kids that you decide to bring into the world, if you put your job ahead of that, then you are going to raise a pack of brats. You know, you are going to raise a pack of troubled people. And it makes me sad that the Queen had so much pressure on her plate to be the Queen that she wasn't able to adequately raise her children, because they all struggled. They all had personal problems, and a lot of them had deep emotional problems. But I think of all our kids, Andrew was the most troubled, obviously. But he wasn't just emotionally troubled like I think Charles was emotionally troubled. I think Anne was emotionally troubled. I don't really know much about Edward. But the older two, I think, really struggled to connect emotionally with other people, and then would fight and claw to stay with the people who they felt understood them. I mean, Anne had many affairs and divorces, and then obviously we know Charles' situation with Camilla. They all seem very broken when it comes to their intimate relationships, but generally trying to do the work set out before them in the proper way, you know. But Andrew doesn't even have that. He's emotionally broken and he has no work ethic. I mean, he is like every single problem that a person could have as a member of the royal family, all wrapped up, and a big bow and a big label on it says Andrew. You know, he is every single problem the royal family could ever have. And the problem is because, like King David, we have Queen Elizabeth over here who could not even ask Andrew, what are you doing? You know? problematic. All right. Well, I will see you guys tomorrow. We'll have more of the book, and we'll just keep plugging away. All right. I'll see you soon. Bye.